Hello students, in this module we are going to discuss special square matrices, properties of special square matrices, orthonormal basis in linear algebra. This is remember part 6 of the module on linear algebra of the course CHE 641 at IIT Kanpur. Okay, now one of the simplest possible matrix that you can think of is called a diagonal matrix. A diagonal matrix is if you have entries only in along the diagonals. So I'm giving a 3 by 3 example, a matrix of these are square matrices. Okay, we are restricting ourselves to square matrices in this discussion. Square matrices are the ones in which the number of rows and number of columns are the same. They are of the order n by n. Okay, so there are only entries alpha, beta, gamma. They need not be the same. If alpha, beta, gamma all equal to 1, then you get what is called the identity matrix. 1 0 in a third order identity matrix will look like this. Of course, you can generalize it to any order. Okay. The advantage of having a diagonal matrix is that its inverse is, so sometimes people write this as diag of alpha, beta, gamma, meaning that alpha, beta, gamma lie along the diagonals, all the other elements are 0. If A is a diagonal matrix, then A inverse is diagonal of 1 by A11, 1 by A12, 1 by ANN. Okay, so suppose instead of alpha, beta, gamma, if I write A as diag in general, A11, I'm sorry, this is A22, A22, A33, so on up to ANN. That is, only the diagonal entries are non-zero with these values, all the other entries are 0. Then A inverse is very simple. It's just diagonal of 1 over A11, 1 over A22 and so on. And if A and B are diagonal matrices, then they commute. Then AB equals BA. That is, diagonal matrices commute under multiplication. Okay, so this is a very useful type of matrix. We will get to see such matrices as we go along. So I'm just telling you what are the different types of special square matrices. The next simplest type of square matrices are the lower and upper triangular matrices. Okay, now what is a lower triangular matrix? A lower triangular matrix is one in which you have, suppose you have this matrix, these are the diagonal elements. Okay, and this matrix is populated only on the diagonal and below. Above the diagonal all the entries are 0. Okay, whatever the order it is, so these are non-zero. This is called a lower triangular matrix. The reason for the name should become obvious. The entries of the matrix looks like a triangle on the lower side. Okay, this is called a lower triangular matrix. Of course, you will now guess what an upper triangular matrix would look like. Suppose this is the diagonal. These matrices have entries along the diagonal and the upper side of the diagonal to be non-zero, and along the lower side it's 0. So these are called, such a matrix is called an upper triangular matrix. Okay, now what are the advantages of these matrices? All these special matrices have some convenient properties. If matrix A is lower or upper triangular, then determinant of A becomes simply the product of all the diagonal entries. You can verify yourself that because of the presence of all these zeros, the determinant will just be the product of the diagonal entries in either case. So this is a very huge simplification while calculating determinants, especially if you are able to reduce it to a lower or upper triangular form, then the determinant calculation is very trivial. Okay. Another important class of matrices are called symmetric matrices. What are symmetric matrices? We know that if I have a matrix A with elements A, I, J, okay, then its transpose A transpose will have elements A, J, I. Symmetric matrices are ones in which A is equal to A transpose, okay, or in terms of elements, the element Aij will become is the same as Aji. For example, if I say 2, 1, 4, okay, and then 1, 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, okay. So this is the element A12, that is the same as A21. So the A12 is A21. This is the element A13, that is the same as A31. A13 is A31, and this is the element A23, and this is the element A32. So A23 is the same as A32. In general, Aij is Aji in index notation form, or in abstract form, A is A transpose. If the matrix and its transpose are identical, then such matrices are said to be symmetric matrices. Okay. Now, another type of matrices are called skew or anti-symmetric matrices. What are these? These are such that A becomes minus A transpose, or Aij is minus Aji. Okay. Now, if Aij is minus Aji, if I put I equal to j, I'll get A11 is minus A11. That means A11 has to be 0. A22 has to be minus A22. Similarly, A22 has to be 0. So in general, ANN is minus ANN, means ANN has to be 0. So antisymmetric matrices have zeros in the diagonal entries. Along the diagonal. Okay. Now, you can also imagine what an antisymmetric matrix will look like. For example, I say this is 2, so 0, 1, minus 1, right? 4, minus 4, 0, 0, 5, minus 5. So this is again this is A12, this is A21, but they are negative of each other. Similarly, this is A13, this is A31, again they are negative of each other, and so on. So this is the definition of an antisymmetric or a skew symmetric matrix. Okay, so these are also very important. For example, in the context of fluid mechanics, you can write the velocity gradient tensor as a sum of symmetric and antisymmetric tensors, and they have important physical implications. So right now we'll just tell you that such decompositions are such classifications are very important. Okay. Now, then, if A is either plus or minus A transpose, whether it is symmetric or skew symmetric, then A inverse whole transpose is A transpose whole inverse, that is equal to plus or minus A inverse. Okay. So if A is equal to A transpose, right, then A transpose whole inverse is the same as A inverse. If A is equal to minus A transpose, then A transpose whole inverse is minus A inverse. Okay, just from the definitions of symmetric and skew symmetric. Also, any n by n square matrix which is neither symmetric nor antisymmetric can be readily written as a sum of a symmetric part plus a sum of an antisymmetric part. Okay, suppose what I am doing is I am writing A as A by 2 plus A by 2, and then I am adding A transpose by 2 here, and then I am subtracting the same here, and this part is this and this part is this. Now you can verify that this is the symmetric part, whereas this is the antisymmetric part. Okay, so any matrix, square matrix, can be written in terms as a sum of a symmetric and antisymmetric matrix. Another important class of square matrices are called orthogonal matrices. What are orthogonal matrices? They are such that A transpose is A inverse. The transpose of the matrix is the inverse of the matrix. Now this has some nice properties. Suppose I consider A inverse of if A is an orthogonal matrix. Okay, then A inverse whole transpose is nothing but A transpose whole inverse. That is, but A transpose is the same as A inverse. So this is A inverse whole inverse. Okay, so that means that A inverse whole transpose is equal to A inverse whole inverse. If I think of A inverse as B, then if I just call A inverse as B, then this becomes B transpose is equal to B inverse. That is, if A is orthogonal, so is its inverse. That is, if A is orthogonal, A transpose is A inverse, then this automatically guarantees its inverse, A inverse whole transpose, is also the same as A inverse whole inverse, which is A. Okay. Now, for orthogonal matrices, A transpose is A inverse. Okay. Or if I post multiply A on both sides, A transpose A is equal to A inverse A, but A inverse A is I from the definition of inverse, so A transpose A is I. Suppose I consider determinant of this product is determinant of identity matrix is 1, but determinant of product of two matrices is the product of the determinants. So this is determinant of A transpose times determinant of A equals 1. Okay, so but determinant of A transpose is the same as determinant of A for any matrix. Okay, so determinant of A whole squared is 1, or determinant of A is plus or minus 1. So for orthogonal matrices, the determinant are either plus or minus 1. Okay, right. Now, so another important property of an orthogonal matrix, suppose I use so orthogonal matrix is a matrix. We have seen in length earlier that a matrix is basically a representation of a linear operator in a given basis. Okay, so in a given basis, if I operate, let A be orthogonal. Let's say I consider a linear transformation y is equal to Ax, where A is an orthogonal matrix. Now I consider the inner product of y with y. What is the inner product of? Let's assume y to be a real vector, a vector in the real vector space. Okay, so we'll come to complex shortly. So what is the inner product of y with y in matrix or vector form? So this is simply y transpose vector, then y vector. But what is Y transpose? Okay, let's write in steps. If Y is this, Y transpose is nothing but X transpose A transpose. So Y transpose Y is X transpose A transpose, but Y is simply A X, but A transpose is A inverse, so because A is orthogonal, but A inverse A should be I, so this is X transpose X, this is Y transpose Y. So what is X transpose X? This is the norm of the original vector, the inner product of X with itself, and this is the inner product of Y with itself. So in general, if I consider a linear transformation, right, the length of this vector will change. The norm of the vector will in general change. Norm is not necessarily equal to the norm of X. Okay, but when the transformation is due to an orthogonal matrix, if A is orthogonal, we have shown that the norm of Y is the same as norm of X. So what this means is that an orthogonal transformation merely rotates a vector and it does not lead to a stretching or contraction of the original vector. So the length of this vector and length of this vector will remain the same. So geometrically it implies an orthogonal transformation implies pure rotation. So an orthogonal linear transformation implies pure rotation. Now all these ideas can be generalized to complex valued matrices. So instead of symmetric matrix, you will have what is called a Hermitian. What is a Hermitian matrix? A is equal to A dagger. Okay. And what is an anti-Hermitian matrix? Okay. A is equal to minus A dagger. Okay. And any matrix A can be written as a sum of a Hermitian matrix and a skew Hermitian or anti-Hermitian matrix. So all these are very similar to the real counterparts, namely that where you had symmetry, you now have Hermitian conjugate. Now the analog of orthogonal matrix when generalized to complex vector space becomes what is called the unitary matrix. What is a unitary matrix? A unitary matrix is one in which A dagger becomes A inverse. Remember, for orthogonal matrix you had A transpose is A inverse. Wherever transport happens, you change it to the Hermitian conjugate. So this is basically the generalization of orthogonal matrix to complex vector space. And we can show that determinant of A dagger A is equal to determinant of A dagger determinant of A. Okay. Now determinant of A dagger is nothing but determinant of A whole star, the complex conjugate of determinant. So this is nothing but this is mod A squared. So this is like a complex number. So okay, let me write it again. Determinant of A dagger A is the absolute value of the complex number A star A, right, square, right. That means the determinant has unit modulus. So determinant of A has unit modulus. If the matrix is unitary, then its determinant has unit modulus, whereas when the case of real valued matrices, it's either plus or minus 1. Here there is also the phase of the complex number. Okay, therefore we only say it has unit modulus. You don't say it has plus or minus 1. It can have angle as well. Okay, another important class of matrices are called normal matrices. A normal matrix is one in which a matrix A commutes with its Hermitian conjugate, that is A dagger is A dagger A. Okay. In general, sorry about this. In general, you know that if I multiply two matrices, they don't commute. But if the matrix is, if A is normal, then if you multiply A by A dagger, it's the same as A dagger times A. That is, a normal matrix A commutes with its Hermitian conjugate. Okay, so examples of normal matrices are basically Hermitian matrices, because a Hermitian matrix is one, A is A dagger, so it doesn't matter where you write. So Hermitian or symmetric for real matrices, and then unitary or orthogonal matrices, all will satisfy this thing. Okay, so just as if you had A is equal to A transpose, we call that a symmetric matrix. In real case, if A is A dagger, you call it a Hermitian matrix or a Hermitian operator. Many textbooks also call this, if A is A dagger, they will also use a very important word. They call it the operator to be self-adjoint. So Hermitian matrices and operators are one and the same as self-adjoint matrices and operators. Okay, so these are just some special matrices with some neat properties. We will of course encounter them as we go along. Right now I am just doing it for the sake of introducing you to these matrices and their properties. Now let's move along and let's discuss a little bit about basis sets in a normed linear vector space. So this is a jargon that I am introducing. Sorry, let me write it properly. Normed. A linear vector space is something that we have already discussed in the beginning of linear algebra. There are some axioms that have to be followed. But what is a normed linear vector space? A linear vector space in which you can define a norm is called a normed linear vector space. Okay, suppose if I have a vector x, okay, that is an n-dimensional. So this is called an n-dimensional vector. En denotes an n-dimensional vector space. Okay, then I can write x in terms of some basis vectors where I goes from 1 to n. Because it's an n-dimensional vector space, there are n basis vectors. One of the simplest basis vectors is given by EI is 0, 0, except the ith row, everything else is 0. So in ith row, sorry, it's 1. So for example, E1 is 1, 0, 0, E2 is 0, 1, 0, and so on. Okay. So this is one of the simplest bases in an n-dimensional space. So this set of vectors E1, E2, E3, En is a basis set, where E's are defined here. It's a basis set. Okay, in the vector n-dimensional vector space En. So any vector x1, x2 can be written as x1 times 1, 0, 0 plus x2 times 0, 1, 0 plus so on up to plus xn times 0, 0 all the way up to then 1. Okay, so you can also verify that Ei Ej is delta Ij. Why is that? You can write this in terms of a column vector and row vector. So if this is the abstract notation, if I want to write it in terms of proper, so this is Ei dagger Ej. So you have to represent this as a row vector, so you have to take transpose, but then inner products, the first vector comes with a conjugate, right? So this is Ei dagger Ej. Now that you can readily verify these for this particular basis set, simplest basis set you have chosen is an orthonormal basis set. So this is an orthonormal basis. Orthonormal means orthogonal plus normalized. Their inner products will be 1 when you take an inner product of a vector with itself. Okay, right. So now any set of linearly independent vectors, but it's not just necessary to use this orthonormal set. It's one of the simplest sets for sure, but you can also use any set of linearly independent vectors, okay, as a basis. And this is a very, very important idea that you should think about and then get it internalized, because this is one of the most profound ideas in linear algebra, that you can represent the same vector, or as we go along later, the same function in different bases. Okay, so you can also write the same in terms of some other coefficients alpha I, xi. Okay, I is equal to 1 to n, where xi is a set of linearly independent n vectors which are linearly independent. Okay, so this x is nothing but, you can think of all the bunch of xi's as x1, x2, xn. So this is like a matrix, right? Because each of this is a column vector. So the column vector x1 will occupy this, the column vector x2 will occupy this, and so on up to column vector xn will occupy this. So this can be thought of a big matrix X, and you can think of the coefficients of expansion alpha 1 as another column vector. So I can write this in matrix form as x is x times alpha. So this is the alpha vector, this is the x matrix, this is a square matrix, of course, right? So because this is a set of linearly independent vectors, okay, this matrix has inverse. X inverse exists because this is linearly independent. If this were to be linearly dependent, then the determinant of this matrix will be 0 and inverse is not defined. So x is non-singular, x inverse exists. Therefore, if x inverse exists, then how do I find this coefficient alpha? I pre-multiply both sides by x inverse. So this is identity. So alpha is nothing but, from the previous equation. So there are two things here. I want to write a given vector in terms of a basis, and if I want to know what are the coefficients of this vector in that basis, that is this coefficient vector alpha, should merely multiply this vector, original vector, by x inverse, where x is this transformation matrix. Okay, so this is a very useful idea once again, and we will see that the same idea carries over to functions as well as we go along. Okay, now what if you say that I have a set of linearly independent vectors in an n-dimensional space. Okay, this is the technique that we are going to discuss now. It's called Gram-Schmidt ortho normalization. It's a very useful and important technique in linear algebra. Suppose I have a set of n linearly independent vectors. Okay, now I want to be able to generate, can we generate from this set of vectors a set of n orthonormal vectors? Why is this important? Because orthogonal basis or orthonormal basis are very simple, because as we know, finding the coefficients of expansion of a given vector in an orthonormal basis is very simple. Okay, so the answer is yes, of course. We can generate from a set of linearly independent vectors a set of orthogonal or orthonormal vectors, and that procedure is called Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization. Okay, so we would be able, what we want to first step is to generate a set y1 to y1 set of orthogonal vectors, and then we will normalize it to make it orthonormal. So in order to do this, the first step is, let's assume y1 is the same as z1. The first vector, let's call that y1 also as z1. Now y2 is computed like this. I take z2. Now I want y2 to be perpendicular to y1, so I have to remove whatever component of y2 that is along the y1 direction or z1 direction. So what I do is I take the inner product of y with z1, okay, and I divide it by y1 squared, and this is the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to take this vector, and then I want to make a modulus of this, right? So I'm just dividing this by y1 squared, okay, so that this becomes like a unit vector. Okay, there are two y1s here. Sorry, this should be y1, and therefore you have y1 squared. Okay, so what I'm essentially doing is I'm trying to remove the component of z1 or y1 in z2 by first taking the by removing I'm sorry, this has to be z2. I'm sorry, this has to be z2. That's the reason why I take z2, and then I take the inner product of z2 along y1. Because it's an inner product, the first thing has to be Hermitian conjugate, and this is the inner product of z2 and y1. And because I want to write it in terms of unit vectors, I'm dividing. This is also y1. Sorry, if it okay, and this is, so I have to subtract this projection multiplied by this direction. Okay, and that direction is y1. But if I want to get a unit vector or vector with unit norm, I'll divide by mod y1. Because there are two y1s, I'm dividing by mod y1 squared. So to give a simple analogy, if I have three vectors a, b, c, okay, let's assume the first vector x1 as a. Now a, b, c are not perpendicular, let's say in geometry. So I want to first construct x2 from b, which is perpendicular to a. What will I do? So I'll take b. Now I will take the dot product of b along a, which is x1, and this should be in the direction of x1, but I want the unit vector, so I'll divide by this. So same here also, right? So the mod is to ensure that you are dotting with unit vector. So basically you are trying to subtract the projection of b in the x1 direction, and this is the projection. Of course you need a vector, so you have to multiply it by the unit vector, and you can do so this way. You will find that x1 dot x2 is 0. How? You simply x1 dot x2 is, so this is x2, so I have to dot it with x1, b dot x1 minus b dot x1, okay, upon x1, right? So okay, so I have to, I'm sorry, I'll just take a step back. So I'm dotting this entire equation with x1. So this is x1 dot x2, b dot x1 minus b dot x1, and then x1 dot x1 by x1 squared, but x1 dot x1 is x1 squared, so this will be unity, so this is 0. This is the same thing that's happening here. Instead of dot products, I'm using the inner product notation, right? So y3 is z3 minus y1 cap, or sorry, y1 dagger z3. So now I have to, y3 has to be made perpendicular to both y1 and y2, so I have to subtract the projections along both y1 and y2. So first I'll take z3, take the projection along y1, and then multiply it by y1, divide by squared, and then same with, I have to take z3, the projection of z3 along y2, right, then multiplied by y2, squared, and so on. So this is for the third vector, and similarly you can go on and on for the nth vector. Yn is Zn minus summation j is equal to 1 to n minus 1 yj dagger Zn, okay, by mod yj or norm yj squared yj. So the same thing has to be repeated for all the other vectors, right? So by doing this, we have ensured that y1 dagger y2 is 0, y1 dagger y3 is 0, y2 dagger y3 is 0, and so on. Okay, in general we have ensured that yj dagger yi is 0 for I not equal to j. Now the point is, we have not yet normalized it. We have to ensure also that if I take the inner product of this with itself, you should get 1. So we normalize this by saying xi is yi by norm of yi. Okay, if you do this, then for all the vectors, then if you do that, then you will find that xi dagger, where xi is calculated like this, xj is delta ij. You will get a normalized set of vectors. Xi's will be they are orthogonal to each other, and they are also normalized. So they are called orthonormal. Xi's form an orthonormal set. So this is called an orthonormal basis. Okay, right? So if x1 so on up to xn form an orthonormal basis, okay, then you can expand any vector x in terms of this basis, I going from 1 to n. That's the dimension of the space. Now how will you find the coefficients alpha I? So I have to multiply both sides by xj x, okay. Now xj xi is delta ij. They are orthonormal, we just found them. So this delta ij and this alpha is summed over will simply give me alpha j is xj dagger x. So if I have an orthonormal set, it becomes very easy to find the coefficients of expansion, right? Okay, now I have told you that x is now where xi's are an orthonormal set, alpha I xi. I can also write this as xi alpha I, but I can also write this as, but what is alpha I? We just found what alpha here we have found alpha j, so you can write alpha I is nothing but xi dagger x. So instead of alpha I will write xi dagger x. This is xi, summation is over I. Okay, now if this side is x and this is x, this entire thing should be identity. Okay, so summation over I xi dagger for an orthonormal basis should give me identity. This procedure is called resolution of an identity in a given orthonormal basis. Of the identity in a given orthonormal basis. Okay, now suppose you ask me the question, all is this is fine. Suppose I don't have an orthonormal set, okay, and I don't want to use Gram-Schmidt. So let's say x1 x2 if is an orthonormal is a non-orthonormal, but linearly independent set. Okay, now I told you that you can still expand x in terms of this basis vectors xi, but finding alpha i's becomes a little messy, right? It's not so simple. So there is a special trick to find alpha, the coefficient of expansion in a non-orthonormal basis. In order to do this, you have to find what is called a reciprocal basis. Z1, Z2, a set of n vectors such that Zi dagger xj is delta ij. We know that when the basis is non-orthonormal, then xi dagger xj is not delta ij, right? Because it's non-orthonormal. But what we are saying is, suppose we find another basis called the reciprocal basis containing the vectors z1, z2, so on up to zn, such that if I take Zi dagger operating on xj, if then these two sets of vectors are orthonormal. Okay. So to give you a very simple example, okay, suppose I have 3 in geometry. I'll give you a geometric example. In geometry, suppose I have 3 non-coplanar vectors. Okay, ABC. Okay, so now I want to generate from this set, I want to generate a set of 3 vectors such that those 3 vectors are orthogonal to each of these 3 vectors. Okay, now what I do is the following. Suppose I take B and C. Okay, now if I take B cross C, okay, now B cross C will point in the direction perpendicular to B and C. So it will point in the direction perpendicular to the plane containing B and C. Okay, so I can construct A hat or A caret such that it is B cross C by A dot B cross C. If I do this, then if I consider A dot A dagger or A hat, I'm sorry, you will get 1, because by definition. Okay, now similarly B hat is A cross C by B dot A cross C, and C hat is A cross B by C dot A cross B. So you can verify that A dot A is 1, B dot B is 1, C dot C caret is 1. Okay, but all the other A dot B is A dot C caret is equal to C dot A caret. All these are other quantities are 0. Okay, why is A dot B caret 0? So if you have A dot A cross C, if you have 2 A's, then you know that that product is 0, right, from basic vector calculus. Now this is just an example in geometry how to generate 3 reciprocal vectors that are perpendicular to that form a reciprocal basis such that you can find the coefficients as if they are orthogonal, right? So now let's first, so therefore if we have a linearly independent non-orthogonal basis, which is in our notation x1, x2, xn, right? Then since they are linearly independent, I can write any vector in terms of these vectors. Okay, now let's assume a reciprocal basis Zi's, a bunch of n vectors. Then how do I find the coefficients alpha I? Because it's reciprocal, I can take Zj dagger x is nothing but summation over I alpha I Zj dagger xi, but Zj dagger xi is delta ij, because that's how we are constructing the reciprocal basis, right? Xi inner product Zi dagger, x1 inner product z1 dagger is 1, but any other vector is 0, right? That's how we are constructing these vectors, right? So alpha j, this delta and this summation will give you alpha j is nothing but, so if you have a reciprocal basis, then the coefficients of expansion of any vector in a non-orthogonal linearly independent basis can be easily found using by taking inner products of the original vector with the reciprocal basis. Okay, so it's almost as easy the moment you find the reciprocal basis. It's almost as easy as an orthonormal basis. Okay, right. So if x is summation alpha I xi, right? But what is alpha I? Alpha is you can also rewrite it as xi alpha I, but alpha I is zi dagger x. So this is xi zi dagger x. Sorry about this. Okay, this is x. So if x is something times x, this is identity. So summation over I xi zi dagger is identity. This is the resolution of identity using the reciprocal basis. Now I have been silent on telling you how to find the reciprocal basis. That's what we will do next. How to find the reciprocal basis. Now let's assume this set of linearly independent vectors. If I arrange them in terms of column vectors, then they will form a matrix, right? This is the first column is x1, the second column is x2, and the nth column is xn, right? Now, right, this is the, let's call this matrix big X. Okay, because these are linearly independent, x inverse exists, right? So you know that x inverse x is equal to I, and in component form it's delta ij. Now how do you find the reciprocal basis? Now let's define another big matrix Z dagger as x inverse. Or what is the matrix Z? It's x inverse whole dagger. Okay, so what is, if I find from x inverse I can find the matrix Z. Now that will comprise of a bunch of column vectors z1, z2, zn. Okay, right? Now if this is Z, what is Z dagger? It becomes, so Z is the matrix big Z is a assembly of column vectors. So Z dagger will become an assembly of row vectors of Z1 dagger, Z2 dagger, Zn dagger. But Z dagger is nothing but x inverse. Okay, that's how we have defined. That's how we have defined Z on the first place. Or Z dagger x is nothing but Z1, Z2, Zn dagger x1, x2, xn. This is nothing but Za dagger xj, right? This is the inner product of Za dagger, right? This is just the inner product of Za dagger xj, right? You are multiplying this with respect to this. Okay, and this is nothing, I mean, let's not call dagger. This is the inner product of the, okay, this is nothing but, okay, but Z dagger is x inverse. This is nothing but x inverse x, that is identity. Z dagger is x inverse, right? X inverse x is identity. So if I take Zi dagger and then multiply it by xj, I should get delta ij. Okay, so this is how you have found a set of vectors from the original set of vectors, linearly independent vectors, such that the reciprocal vectors are orthogonal or orthonormal to the original set. Okay, so that is how one finds the orthonormal set. How do you find the orthonormal set? you take the original set of vectors, write it as a matrix in terms of column vectors, and X inverse is bound to exist because they are linearly independent. Define Z such that Z dagger is X inverse or Z is X inverse whole dagger. Now once you find Z, you can write Z in terms of a bunch of column vectors, right? And you can verify that Z dagger times X is the same as X inverse times X, which is identity. So Z dagger times X is basically all these vectors individually taking an inner product with respect to these vectors, the original set of vectors. So Zi dagger Xj is delta Ij, or Zi Xj is delta Ij. Okay, so this is how one uses or one finds the reciprocal basis to help find the coefficient of expansion of any vector in a non-orthonormal basis xi. Okay, so I'll stop here, and in the next module we'll start with a very important part of linear algebra, and that is related to what is called the eigenvalue problem. Okay, thank you for your attention.